I take this broadly as an opportunity to talk about incentives to produce under a more egalitarian system. Why would people work if they faced steeper levels of income tax or wealth tax? Well, because they want to be richer than other people, and under socialism, you could still be richer. You wouldn't have the 300-to-1 split between CEO pay and average worker pay. Instead, in a lot of cooperatives, like in the Basque region of Spain, Mondragon cooperatives that are a kind of model for a kind of socialist institution, there the highest paid employees make, say, 4 times what the lowest paid employees make. And they're perfectly competitive. But put Mondragon aside, just talk about our own country. As I'm sure you both have heard this statistic, but I mean, back, the highest level of, the top marginal tax rates used to be much, much higher in the 50s and 60s, indeed up to 90%. Was there an economic calamity? Did the dominant peacock say, I'm not going to show my peacock feathers off anymore? No, because it turns out that what human beings really want is to be better than the next guy. It doesn't matter necessarily how much better in absolute terms, or it doesn't matter how much in absolute terms they have. It doesn't matter to Bill Gates whether he has $15 trillion in his bank account or $1 billion. He just wants to have more than Mark Zuckerberg. And you can have relative inequality under socialism. We're just not going to have this ridiculous absolute inequality where you've got people with trillions, billions of dollars and people starving in the streets. So the big picture point then is socialism is perfectly compatible with allowing some inequality for the sake of incentives.
So I hate this dominance theory. I think it's awful and terrible, and it justifies the worst kind of elements that would be critiqued against, that exist within society. Because it says that we're basically just regular animals. Some of us have this dominance thing, and we're willing to step on other lobsters to get to the top, and to hell with those other lobsters. And it's a zero-sum world, and we're going to destroy the competition in order to get to the top. And it's all about relative. I want to be better than the other guy. I think all of that is bullshit. I don't think any of that is true. We're not lobsters. We're human beings. And as human beings, we have the capacity to reason. We have the capacity to create stuff that doesn't exist before. We don't become wealthy at other people's expense like lobsters do. We actually create wealth that benefits everybody else around us because they all get to trade with us. So we don't rise to the top by stepping on other people like the lobster example. And we're not programmed to step on other lobsters and other human beings to advance. And we're not motivated. I don't believe for one iota Bill Gates looks at the top 400 wealthy and figures out where he is relative and motivated by getting higher up on the top of the list. None of these guys are motivated by that. If you know billionaires, what they're motivated by is the love of producing, the love of creating something, the love of making something beautiful. Yeah, he didn't create the iPhone, which is somewhere over there, because he wanted to be richer than somebody else. He created the iPhone because he was inspired by something beautiful that could change his life and our life. And trade for that. And yes, he wanted to make a lot of money, but the measure of money is not relative to other people. The measure of money is how much did I impact the world? Money is a symbol for how much value I've created. Because how do you become a billionaire? How do you become a billionaire? We talk about this abstraction of people having billions. But how did Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Bezos, these guys become billionaires? By trading with us. Did we win or lose from that trade? Well, why did we enter it? Why did we buy the iPhone? Why do we use Amazon? Because we believe that it makes our lives better. So we enter the trade because we believe we're going to make our lives better. So the only way for them to become billionaires is for millions, no, not millions, billions of us to trade with them in a way that we believe will make our lives better. So the only way for Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and these guys to become billionaires in a free market, we'll talk about the corrupt ones in a minute, I guess, is by making the world a better place for everybody else. By applying their own mind to a problem that exists out there, a problem of human survival, a problem of human production, and coming up with the best idea and then trading with other people, making their lives better in win-win relationships, in trader relationships, voluntary relationships, not relationship that are imposed, not relationship that is zero-sum relationship, not lobster-like relationships. Human beings are different. We're not predetermined by genetics to invent iPhones. It doesn't work that way. There's no way that we're predetermined to invent iPhones. You have to make choices. You have to use your reason. You actually have to think to come up with an iPhone or any product that's out there. We don't, even this building. Animals don't do this. They can't. Right? So billionaires become billionaires by making the world a better place. They do it by creating wealth, not by taking wealth. And the fact that 26 people are richer than 3.5 billion is because 26 people have created, objectively created, more wealth than 3.5 billion, because the fact is the 3.5 billion are barely surviving. All they're doing is they're farming and they're eating what they produce. And I bet you the net worth, by the way, in this room, I'm probably richer than all of you combined, or at least the students combined. I'll take out the adults, because your net worth is negative, because you've got student loans. It doesn't mean I'm rich. It just means I have a positive net worth. So 26 people actually created a lot of wealth. 3.5 billion, sadly, haven't created the wealth yet. If they lived under capitalism, they wouldn't be that poor.
We all know there are people, say for example, the Wells Fargo crisis. It's just absolutely appalling. And when you look it up, they knew exactly what they were doing. And so, you know, they were targeting people that couldn't speak the language. They were targeting people that were the elderly. These are the people, what is Wells Fargo? Like number 4, number 3 of the biggest banks? So, and they, in order to drive, like, so we have this system of capitalism that incentivizes like growth. So in order to fake their profits, because, you know, they have to show the people that want security for their stocks to rise up, they are faking sales.
How do you protect against corruption? That's the only reason to have a government. It's to catch the crooks. Right? That's the one thing the government should do. So if there's real fraud, then catch the real fraudsters. But the problem is today that that's not what the primary job of government is. So everybody remember Bernie Madoff? I know you guys are too young maybe, but Bernie Madoff, big pyramid scheme. He basically stole $63 billion from his friends and family members. Did the SEC catch him? SEC, responsible for protecting us from fraud in the securities market. Did they catch him? No. They got a report twice from a hedge fund that said, this guy's a crook. Here's what he's doing. And they couldn't catch him. They couldn't get him. Why? Why couldn't the SEC get him? Because the fact is the SEC is not about catching crooks. The SEC is about monitoring my behavior. I'm not a crook, just so full disclosure. I happen to be in the financial in the financial business as a business on the side, and I do some buying and selling. But the SEC monitors everything I do. I have to file a 13D and a 13G and a 13 this and a, you know, and then they send in their inspectors to, you know, I have a whole compliance office. I have a whole thing of compliance where they come in and look at my books. They're so busy monitoring what I'm doing that who has time to catch crooks? Indeed, they almost never catch crooks. It's rare that they actually file. Usually, who catches the crooks? The market does. In the case of Bernie Madoff, who caught him? Well, the hedge fund guy who wrote the memos twice, and who landed up at the end catching him? His son. His son called in the police. So, if the government actually did its job, its one job, which is to protect us from crooks and criminals and fraudsters, the world would be different. And just to relate to the Wells Fargo example, in capitalism, there are no bailouts. By definition, capitalism is anti-bailouts. There's no too big to fail in capitalism. I'd go further. There's no deposit insurance in capitalism. Yet why do people keep their deposits in Wells Fargo in spite of the fact that they've committed fraud? Because who cares? If something really bad happens to Wells Fargo, the government's going to step in and pay me back, right? Unless you've got more than $250,000. Who's got more than $250,000 in the bank account? Like, okay, one guy, right? That's pretty amazing, right? Right? They're trying to protect the little guy with deposit insurance. Really, how many little guys have $250,000 in their bank account? So the whole system is corrupt. The whole mechanism of the world in which we live in today is corrupt. Not corrupted by capitalism, corrupted by statism. As soon as you have deposit insurance, now you have to have the regulations to monitor the banks. And then if the bank is very big, it has systemic risks, so we have to bail you out. So by the way, if you have more than $250,000 in your bank account, here's a tip for those wealthy students among you. If you have more than $250,000 in a bank, always put it in a too big to fail bank. So Wells Fargo is a good place for $250,000. Bank of America is a good place. Don't put it in your local community bank, because when it fails, you won't get your money. You'll get everything up to 250, but not above. But if Wells Fargo fails, they'll bail them out. They've told us they'll bail them out. It's in the, so what, you talk about incentives. When you tell somebody, when you make money, you get to keep it all, but when you lose it, we'll bail you out. What kind of behavior do you expect to get? Pretty nutty behavior, right? And that's what we get. So that's not capitalism. There's no bailouts in capitalism. There's none of this stuff in capitalism. Capitalism is a system where the government does one thing. It protects us from the crooks. And if only we had a little bit of that. One of these days we'll have to debate Jordan Peterson, because